The decision to keep the repo rate at 7.5% has dismayed many who were hoping for a reprieve from the economic squeeze. Annaline from Debt Rescue joins us this afternoon to discuss the repercussions for consumers who were barely keeping their heads above water. Very good afternoon to you, Annaline, and thank you as always for joining us. I mean, a little 25 basis points cut would have made a huge difference for those of us with bonds, car repayments, and now it seems as though the Reserve Bank is set to hold indefinitely on the interest rates. I mean, how does that affect consumers who are already struggling with debt?
Good afternoon. Indeed, not well. It's placing us in a very difficult situation because not only are we sitting with the unchanged interest rates, we've obviously recently had our budget speech with the tabled VAT increase. We've got electricity prices going up by 12.7% now in April. It's a lot, and it's very difficult. By no means is this a simple situation for consumers. If you have any form of debt, your debt repayments remain very, very high. We have very high interest rates. And unfortunately, yes, we've seen the CPI figures. We know that inflation is stabilizing here at about 3.2%, but it still means the cost of goods are going up. Nothing is coming down, unfortunately, and it places consumers in a very difficult situation at the moment.
It really does. And I mean, how can they then expect what can they expect rather in terms of increased debt repayment costs and also the higher interest rates on loans and the credit cards, which I assume continue to squeeze them?
Oh, definitely. The unfortunate reality is that from a lot of the economists, at the beginning or a week or so ago, there was a slight hope that we might see a reduction of 0.25%. But obviously, there's a lot of macroeconomic factors that are being monitored. We're specifically looking at what's happening, for example, in America. They speak of possible recession there. We know that there's trade wars going on affecting numerous countries, etc. And all of this, inevitably, it might not just be a question of something that we are doing internally, but the external factors. And then that's what the Reserve Bank governor has put out there, is to say that it's affecting us and not necessarily by anything that we're doing. So for consumers, the only thing that we can advise them at this point is just really know where every rand and cent that you have goes. Make sure you spend as wisely as you possibly can. Shop around for the best deals. Cut out luxuries if you still have any in your budget, but really avoid unnecessary extra debt if you already have debt.
And of course, this holding by the Reserve Bank, Annaline, will probably have an impact on consumer spending as well, or their spending power and overall economic activity.
Very likely. We know, for example, if we look at January's figures, we saw that there was an increase in spending. Again, not completely, unexpected to us. It is January. It's most consumers, might have children that are going back to school. They've got to buy goods for them, etc. So there would be a bit of stimulation. But the moment that consumers are struggling to repay, they are probably going to step back and stop buying unnecessarily. And unfortunately, because of that affects economic growth, etc. So it's just a snowball that we're sitting in, because consumers are doing their utmost to not get into an even worse situation than they already are. And one of the first ways to do that is to cut back on spending.
Are you finding that if they are unable to cut back on spending or find alternative sources of income, that they are increasingly seeking assistance like debt relief to perhaps assist them? Or is that trend the trend hasn't increased in any significant manner?
Oh, no, it's absolutely increased. The number of consumers seeking help in the form of debt review has increased a lot in the last couple of months specifically. It was expected. It usually does pick up at the beginning of the year in any case, but this year has definitely seen a big upward trend in that. And it's a good thing, because obviously we've got this amazing legislation that's created specifically to assist consumers who are over indebted in a legal manner in which they can repay their debt, become debt-free eventually, and avoid legal action and the likes. So it's good that consumers are becoming more and more aware of it and the fact that it's an option. But definitely we are seeing a lot of behavior changes in terms of consumer spending.
And then how do they benefit overall from seeking that debt counseling or the debt consolidation services? Do you find that the overall health of a consumer improves after that process?
Absolutely, yes. It's a massive relief, because firstly, like I say, it's a legal process. So what this means for consumers is that they're not entering into a process that, they don't know where it begins and where it ends. It's a very transparent process. It gives the consumer the ability to avoid entering into new debt because we help them set up a budget. We look at what they need for their necessary living expenses to avoid those expenses being put onto credit. People are buying food on credit. They literally are buying fuel, transport, those kind of things are all being put on credit because they cannot afford it and pay the debt. So this way they avoid debts, and eventually once they've completed the process, they've repaid all their debt, they're debt free. And they can re-enter the credit market and obtain new credits if they feel that they need to do so. But ultimately, it's a positive step because it gives them that protection. Repay their debt.
Thank you very much for those insights. As always, Annaline van der Poel joining us this hour to unpack the impact of the Reserve Bank deciding to leave interest rates unchanged at this particular meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee. Given what we're seeing globally, those geopolitical tensions, the trade wars, it's likely to remain the same for a little while longer. So a little bit more squeeze for consumers that are already stretched at the moment.